Hello. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is a story about the suffering of a lonely soul. It is the story of a man that is falling through the cracks in the society into an abyss of war of all against all. How does someone fall into through the cracks in the society? Is there a way in which someone can do something to break that fall, if you will? Those are some of the questions I want to look at from kind of a theological perspective as we analyze the movie Joker. So, the very first scene in this movie Joker provides the fundamental kind of tension of the whole movie. In the very first scene, Arthur Fleck, who will eventually become the Joker character, sits in front of a mirror and he's painting his face as he's working as a clown. And at that point, he pulls his lips apart to kind of make him smile as he's looking at himself at the mirror. And as he's doing that, he pulls himself so hard that there's a tear that comes from his eye and smudges the painting on his cheeks. So in that one scene, you see the fundamental tension in the sense that his attempt at a smile, his attempt at joy becomes tragic. It turns into a tear. And that is what happens in the movie. His attempt to find happiness ends up resulting in a huge tragedy. So, how does that happen? Arthur Fleck has multiple motivations in the movie. First, his superficial motivation is something that his mom keeps telling him. His mom told him that he was put in this world to bring joy and laughter to people. So he has this fundamental drive to become a stand-up comedian so that he can bring joy to the people around him. And that becomes the basis for his happiness, or that becomes the motivation for his happiness at the very beginning of the movie. The problem is he's confronted by the oppressiveness of the city Gotham. He has teenagers that come and violently abuse him as he's trying to work as this clown. He has people that come in the subway that haze him. He has co-workers that are in some ways manipulative and almost plotting against him. So all of these are things that come at him, preventing him from realizing his sense of happiness. And you also have the problem that Arthur Fleck himself is mentally unstable. He is getting help from the city, the social services, to stay in that space of being sane. And even that eventually gets stopped. So these are all the opposing forces that are there that prevents Arthur Fleck from finding his own sense of happiness. Apart from this, Arthur Fleck has a deeper motivation. And his deeper motivation is to find a father figure. He wants to find a sense in which he is seen as a son to a father who is a powerful man. And in his case, Arthur Fleck chooses that Murray Franklin, who is the host of a TV show, is his father figure. So he has all these hallucinations about Murray Franklin being his father figure. He imagines himself being in the show and Murray Franklin coming and giving him a hug and telling him, "For a son like you, I'll give up everything that I have." So that is a fundamental deeper motivation that is driving Arthur Fleck, and that is the desire to find himself as a beloved son to a powerful father figure. I'm going to have some spoilers here now. Through a strange set of coincidences, Arthur Fleck's attempt at kind of an inane, odd comedy performance ends up being a viral video that is sent to Murray Franklin's TV show. Arthur Fleck finds himself being a guest in Murray Franklin's TV show. When Arthur Fleck meets Murray, he realizes that Murray is jeering at him at his kind of inane comic performances as a way to get better ratings for his TV show. So this disenchants Arthur Fleck. The person that was supposed to be his father figure ends up being another manipulator that is trying to use him to make money. So at this point, Arthur Fleck keeps asking Murray, Do you know what it feels like to be like the other? He keeps repeatedly asking him this question, and Murray Franklin basically doesn't want to kind of get drawn into this sense of empathy for Arthur Fleck. At which point, Arthur Fleck takes a gun from his pocket and shoots Murray Franklin live on TV. The irony is, Arthur Fleck brought this gun to the show in order to kill himself on live TV, but because Murray angers him, he ends up killing Murray instead. Erich Fromm is a psychiatrist that lived during the Nazi era. He said, one of the unhelpful responses that human beings have to suffering goes in the form of depression. And we see that in Arthur Fleck. He is depressed and wants to kill himself. And then Fromm says there is another response that happens to the same kind of suffering from a human being, and that is aggression. People channel their disappointment and suffering into a form of aggression against people around them. And in Arthur Fleck, you see both. You see him get depressed first, and then you see him become aggressive, and he starts to kill people. So when we take a step back, to me, what I realize is, in some ways, this movie is a critique of a society. It's a critique of a particular kind of a society in which there isn't a Christ figure that has empathy for people. There isn't a Christ figure that shows solidarity with human suffering. So let me talk a little bit about the idea of the Christ figure, right? So from within a Christian theological perspective, God in the form of Jesus Christ comes to the world as a way of showing solidarity with human suffering and dying for the sake of human beings so that human beings can be redeemed. So Christ figure is the sense of a person that goes out of the way to suffer as an act of empathy, as an act of showing solidarity with the other person's suffering. In a sense, Arthur Fleck wants that kind of a figure. Arthur Fleck wants someone that will know what it is to be in his shoes, which is why he keeps asking Murray, do you know what it feels like to be the other? And that is a strand that is there right from the beginning of the movie, where Arthur Fleck keeps telling multiple people that he feels that he's not seen by anyone. Which is why I think this movie is a kind of a critique of a society that lacks this kind of a Christ figure. But there is more going on in the movie than just that. Another aspect of the movie is the relationship between Arthur and his mom. At the beginning of the movie, Arthur is very loving towards his mom. He takes good care of her. In fact, that is one of the attractive qualities about Arthur. Arthur's mom at some point tells him that he's the son of Thomas Wayne, who's one of the most powerful and rich persons in Gotham City. So Arthur goes and meets with Thomas Wayne to try to get him to acknowledge Arthur as his son, which of course Thomas Wayne completely denies, and Thomas Wayne tells him that his mom actually adopted him. So Arthur goes and does some research on kind of her backstory and realizes that his mom indeed had adopted him. In fact, he realizes that she had actually abused him or let his boyfriend abuse him when he was a child. And then he realizes it was possible that he's been having all these mental health issues possibly because his mom had allowed all of this abuse in his childhood. When he realizes that, he gets really angry at his mom. He tells her life is a comedy and then takes a pillow, puts it on her face, and kills her. He commits the high crime of matricide. What can go through the mind of a person that makes them commit the sin of matricide? When we look at Arthur, the seeds of this is already sown early on in the movie as to what kind of a person Arthur is. One of the first interactions that Arthur has with another human being is with a social service worker. He goes and talks with his social service worker who gives him his medications. He tells her, I want to just feel good. I want to feel better. Give me more medication. The social service worker says he already is on 7 different medications, and if that doesn't help, nothing else probably would. It is at that point you realize that Arthur's deep motivation is for him to feel good. It is for him to feel better. Whether it comes through getting more medications or it comes through killing people, his ultimate motivation is he wants to feel better about himself. In fact, before he kills his mom, he tells her in all of his life he had never ever been happy. It is only after that he tells her that he does not want his life to be a tragedy. He wants his life to be a comedy, and then takes the pillow, puts it on her face, and kills her. So you see, Arthur's desire for feeling better, Arthur's desire for happiness, when it is not fulfilled, the pain of that gets transmitted to other people. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan friar who has an interesting phrase. He says, pain that is not transformed gets transmitted. And so here again, you kind of again have the sense of the Christ figure come up, except in a slightly different sense. In the Christ figure comes up in the sense that he's someone that takes up the pain and transforms the pain to become a blessing instead of transmitting the pain to other people. So what we have here is, if Arthur Fleck had been willing to embrace the pain, willing to allow the pain to transform him as against transmit that pain to other people, then the outcomes may have been different. The sense of the Christ figure being a part of the redemptive story arc is something that we see in the movie Forrest Gump. In Forrest Gump, Forrest is a mentally challenged person. His mom becomes a form of a Christ figure for him. She suffers alongside him. She goes the extra mile to take suffering upon herself so that Forrest has a better shot at life. So that is unlike how Arthur Fleck's mom treats Arthur in the movie Joker. And then this has an interesting effect on Forrest. As Forrest grows up to become an adult, he becomes a form of a Christ figure to people around him. When he's in the Vietnam War, he goes back into the battlefield to bring people away so that they are safe from the Viet Cong. And again, we find Forrest Gump to be a Christ-like figure to Lieutenant Dan and become a part of the redemptive story arc for Lieutenant Dan in trying to bring Lieutenant Dan away from his sense of depression and loneliness. And Forrest Gump again plays the same role in the life of Jenny, in which no matter what happens, his love for Jenny is unconditional. He becomes a Christ-like figure for Jenny, which is where Jenny finds her own sense of redemption in the movie Forrest Gump. So that is the aspect of the Christ figure that is missing in Joker that leads to tragedy. So let's go back to the question with which we started. Is there a way in which the fall through the cracks could have been stopped? Could someone have done something different? And I think when we look at it from a theological perspective, there are two things that we see. One, if someone had shown that sense of Christ-like love to Arthur Fleck, either in the form of his mom or in the form of his friends from work, or in the form of the social services help that he was getting, then the fall through the cracks could have been stopped. And then there is the second aspect, in which if Arthur himself had taken upon himself a sense of being a Christ-like figure, of allowing his pain to transform him and become a new form of blessedness, instead of allowing his pain to be transmitted through him to other people, even then the tragic consequences could have been avoided. And a part of it is they both are linked. For someone to be a Christ-like figure to other people, they have to have someone else be a Christ-like figure to them, to show them what it means for someone to be unconditionally loved. In Forrest Gump, his mom showed him that sense of what does it mean to be unconditionally loved. The sad part of the movie Joker is he keeps wanting to find that in different people, but he never does. And so he keeps going down this spiral. In many ways, we live in a society that is increasingly fragmented. We live in a society where more and more people are lonely. David Brooks, in his book, The Second Mountain, says the longevity in the United States has come down consecutively for 3 years because of the rise in what is called deaths of despair, which is people dying because of suicide or drug overdose. We live in a society where there is not a sense of connection and empathy and solidarity for the suffering of other people. Emil Durkheim is a sociologist that did some research on the rise of the rates of suicide within industrial nations in the early 20th century. What he found is the people that commit suicide end up being people that are not integrated well with the society. They are people that don't have thick communities and friends and family around them. Emil Durkheim coined this word anomie to describe people that are disconnected from the society. The anomie of the early 20th century was someone that, when pushed to the edge, would commit suicide. What we find today is the anomie of the 21st century is someone, when pushed to the edge, ends up turning into this destructive anarchist who transmits his or her pain to people around them. And that is precisely who Joker is. He is an anomie that becomes an anarchist when pushed to the edge by the society around him. So, from a theological perspective, what this ultimately calls us to is for us to be people that live by the ethic of showing selfless Christ-like love to other people as an act of empathy and showing solidarity with their suffering. We are called to be people who are not suffering avoidant. We are called to be people that transform our pain by meditating on the cross, as against transmitting our pain to people around us. Inasmuch as our society fails to live by this sense of Christ-like ethic, we will become a society that creates more and more anomalies of the kind of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. Thank you.